So we can add shadows to text. In fact, we can add it to text and we can add it to Next, we're going to work on adding shadows. And first, we're going to add shadows to text. So we're going to start right here on this H1 that's in the article. So let's go ahead and we're just going to start adding it and then play with it to see how it works. So we want to go down to the article, and the selector is going to be article, header, and then H1. So that gets the H1 that's inside a header that is inside the article. And to do a text shadow, we say text, the property is text shadow. So that's the property. And the first thing we want to do is say what color it is. So we're going to do an RGB, and this one's going to be 181, 211, 181. And let's just see if we get anything with just that much. So we refresh, nothing shows up. So there's some other properties we need to add besides just the color. So what the first one is the X offset. So how do we want to set it offset it in the X direction? And we're going to do 2 pixels in the X direction. The next one is how many in the Y direction. So we're going to offset it 2 pixels in the Y direction. So we do that and we refresh. And there, do you see that shadow? It's that lighter green color and it's just a little bit offset. Now let's go ahead and change these offsets so they're really visible. And let's make them different because they don't have to be the same. So we can see the horizontal direction and the now. Okay, do you see what a difference that makes? What we did is we said we want to offset it in 12 in the horizontal. So it's 12 pixels to the side. And then we want to do 20 pixels in the vertical. So it's 20 pixels below. Now, that's one kind of shadow, right? And we just get to pick the offset. Now, another thing to consider, notice that when we said the X offset, it went right. And when we did the Y offset, it went down. Well, what if you wanted to go up and left, then you have to use negative values. So here, if I put a negative value here, it's going to do X in the negative direction. And so it goes left. And if I do negative on the Y direction, it will go up. So you can go in any of the 4 directions. Positive values go to the right and down. Negative values go to the left and up. So, and that's how you can decide what direction you want to go to. Well, we don't want it that big. So let's go back to our let's go to about 6 pixels. So we just see a little, so we see some, and we'll do both positive 6 and 6 and save it. And then it offsets. So you see kind of an offset that way. So there you see kind of a medium just offset between the 2 different sizes that we just did. The next value, I guess it's the 4th value, is the blur. And here you can say, how blurry do I want to make it? So right now, notice that they're just as sharp as the actual letters are. And so the blur makes them kind of fade out. So let's go ahead and do just a 4 pixel blur. So if we do that and we refresh, it gets just a little bit blurry. It kind of spreads the edges. Instead of clipped edges, tight edges, it kind of blurs them out. Let's make it big. 40 pixels, that's a large blur. And now it's spread out so far you almost can't see it. So let's go ahead and go down to a little bit smaller and say, let's do a 10 blur, not 410, but just a 10. And there we can see it blurring a little bit. So notice how the letters are less distinct and it just gets to be more of a blur. All right, what we want on this one is we want a 2 pixel and a 2 pixel Y direction and a 1 pixel blur. So almost just a very little bit of blur. So now you see that color, it's not offset very far, just 2 pixels to the right and 2 pixels down and just a teeny bit of blur, just 1 pixel of blur. And that's how we do a text shadow. Now we're going to add a second one. And to do that, we're going to stay in the same text shadow property, but we're going to add a comma. So we add a comma, and now we'll start building a next shadow so we can have more than one. So this one we're going to do RGBA, which means we're going to add some opacity as well, right? So the color is 21, 21, 21, and the opacity is 0.66. Okay, now this one, we're going to offset it a little bit more. So we're going to do 5 pixel in the X direction and 5 pixel in the Y direction, but we're going to put a bigger blur. Here we just want to put, it's going to be a lot of blur. And so we're not going to see the letters distinctly again, but we're going to see a blur around them. Okay, so a little bit of opacity, a lot of blur, and let's refresh. All right, there's that gray color. And the letters are not as distinct, but they're still a shape that matches the letters. And they're a little bit offset. They're 5 pixels to the right, 5 pixels down, and have a 25 pixel blur. And then there's opacity in the color. So the color isn't as distinct because of the opacity as well. And that's how you do text shadows.